Hello, fly tyers, and welcome to Fly Tying Monday. Hopefully, we will be streaming on YouTube. We're going to have someone check that to make sure that it's live. Because last time we did this, for some reason, it didn't live stream on YouTube. If you missed the last fly that I tied, which was the caddis on YouTube, we did put the whole video up in Tom's Tips on the YouTube channel, so you can watch it. Unfortunately, you couldn't see it live, but who cares if it's live or not? Anyways, right? Unless you got some burning questions to ask me. So I'm gonna chat a little bit here while people are coming in, so that we don't start before everybody's here. Matthew says he's super excited to see this tie. Well, Matthew, I hope I don't disappoint you. And Mark and Bill are here. YouTube is working. Great. Everything is good. Mike from Missouri and Nigel from South Wales. Wow. We've had a pretty good international audience here lately. So Jersey is here. And Roger Bird, of course. Roger, I don't think you've missed one of these ever. Mac from Tennessee. Ed from Central Florida. I don't think Ed's missed many of these either. Jamie from Vermont. I know Jamie's been here regularly. Rick from Northwest Montana. Rick, I hope your water's dropping, and I hope you have good summer water. Oh, Northwest wasn't so bad. That's right. Northwest had good snowpack, according to Tim Linehan. Good snowpack, but no flooding. And Wade from the Iowa Driftless, which I'm dying to fish sometime. Brian from my neighbor from Glens Falls, New York. David from England. All right, we got a quorum here today. And if you're here for the first time with one of these Monday fly tying sessions, welcome. We love your questions. We love having you here. And I'm here to help you and to ask questions as we go along. This pattern it's a little bit trickier. It's a little bit fussier than the last one we tied was quite easy. This one's a little bit more of a black diamond tie. It's called the TR Deep Pupa, and it's one of my patterns. Orvis this year is selling a selection of patterns that I use, and these patterns are nothing earth-shaking. They're not terribly innovative. They're just patterns where I have taken aspects of standard trout flies and saltwater flies and modified them just because I thought I could tweak them a little bit for my own fishing, and I think sometimes they're an improvement, especially in the waters that I fish. So this fly is a variation of Gary LaFontaine's Deep Pupa, which is one of my all-time favorite killer flies. For a sunken fly, as an imitation of a caddis pupa, it just seems to turn the fish on. And I've modified it quite a bit, actually. The only thing that is the same as LaFontaine's Deep Pupa is the Antron Shuck that goes around the body. Everything else is different. I tie it differently, but I still consider a variation on Gary LaFontaine's fly, because he came up with the original concept of an Antron bubble around the body of a caddis pupa. And Antron seems to be a magic material. It's easy to find. You can get it at nearly any fly shop. Gary made it famous. It was originally used as a stain-resistant rug yarn material, and it has what he called it trilobal fibers, and they have some sort of reflectivity that seems to appeal to the trout and seems to seems to tell trout, hey, this thing is alive. This is a caddis pupa, or this is a shuck on a mayfly. So it's really kind of one of those magic materials, magic synthetic materials. There's lots of things that we consider magic, like peacock url and pheasant tail and hare's ear, but this is one of those synthetics that seems to have some magic properties. So I took LaFontaine's pattern and I put a bead on it, because we put beads on everything, right, these days, to weight it, mainly to weight it. And I use a black bead because I have found that particularly in waters where people fish a lot of beadhead flies, where they're heavily fished, the LaFontaine's D pupa is often my ace in the hole. And I think that fish get caught and released on lots of shiny flies with bright gold heads might start shying away from those things. So the LaFontaine pattern is a little bit more subtle. Doesn't have any bead on it. Doesn't have any shiny bead on it. And so I use a black bead on this one. I'm mainly using it for weight, not using it for any kind of attractant. You could put a gold bead on this pattern if you want. In fact, you can tie this pattern any way you want. You can make lots of substitutions. Then it won't be my pattern. It'll be your pattern. So I hope some of you are going to tie along. The other thing that I added to this is a way of making the wing pads on a caddis pupa using a piece of saddle hackle. When I look at caddis pupae, I usually find them. It's really hard to find them in the water column because they pop up fairly quickly. But I usually find them when I pump the stomachs of trout, and or I look at pictures of caddis pupae that I've taken or that other people have taken. And the wing pads that kind of hug the body are very prominent, and that's one thing that LaFontaine didn't have in his pattern. So I added these wing pads that are made with a kind of a unique technique using a piece of saddle hackle. So anyway, that's the fly. How do you fish it? Most of the time, dead drift. Most of the time, these caddis pupae are drifting in the water column. It's said that they pop to the surface quite quickly, and you can try dead drifting it and then lifting the rod or stopping your swing to make the fly rise to the surface. Honestly, I haven't had good luck with that. I've had much better luck fishing this just plain dead drift. And I don't like to fish this really deep. When fish are taking caddis pupae, they're generally taking them in the middle of the water column or all the way up. So I don't think you have to sink this all the way to the bottom like you would a stonefly nymph or a mayfly nymph in cold water. I think that you can fish this in mid-water and fish see it and come for it pretty aggressively. One of the best times to fish this pattern is when you have caddis flies hatching. You see caddis flies hatching, and you see fish splashing a lot, but you don't see any bubbles in the rise form. You just see a splash. And what that usually indicates is that the fish are chasing the caddis pupae to the surface, and they're taking them about this far underneath the surface of the water, but that momentum of them turning on that fly creates a swirl or a splash on the water. And sometimes their tail or their dorsal fin will even break the surface of the water, but their mouth doesn't. So they're taking the flies underneath. So those are the times that I fish it. Yes, I can, Leiden, I can use this. You can use this as a dropper. You can use it as a dry dropper. Or you can use it under an indicator. You can fish this Euro nymphing technique. You can fish this any old way you want to fish nymphs. You can also fish it all by itself with no indicator and no Euro nymphing and a floating line. Just throw it out there like a real fly without any junk on the leader. You can put split shot ahead of it. You can do anything that you would do with any other nymph with this fly. But again, I find fishing at dead drift usually under an indicator or under a dry fly is the best bet. But you try it whatever way you fish nymphs and see how it works for you. Okay, and no, Leiden, this one does not look similar to a Hendrickson nymph at all. That might be my wire mayfly nymph. This one does not look at all like a Hendrickson, at least to my eyes. Mark asked, that's a good question. Does anyone know if fish are attracted to UV in dubbing? Well, there are some people that believe that that fish are attracted to UV in dubbing, and apparently they can put some sort of treatment in a dubbing to make it UV reflective. However, there's a couple things to think about. One is that it's just another color. If fish can see UV, just another color. So does it matter how important color is? I'm not sure. And the other thing is that all the sources I've seen say that fish lose their UV vision after the par stage, after the little tiny trout stage, and they lose their UV vision for whatever adaptive reasons. So they apparently adult trout don't have, according to everything I've read, don't have UV vision. So I don't believe in UV. I think that some of the dubbings that are labeled UV are just really nice, attractive dubbings. And I think that may be it. But whether it's the UV treatment or not, of course, we'll never know. But I'm not a believer in making sure that you have some sort of UV treatment. But again, some of the UV stuff is just really nice fly tying material to begin with. Okay, so let's start. Let's take a look at what we're doing here. So I'm using a wide gap a tactical hook. This is a barbless hook that has really good holding power because of that kind of curved in bend there. It really holds fish well despite the fact that it's barbless. And fish, beadhead flies on barbless hooks are notorious for getting shaken loose because there's some weight there, and the fish, when it shakes its head, can get the hook out. But this particular curvature seems to make the fish a little less likely to shake the hook. So it comes out easily, but you can play a fish and even release a little tension on it, and the hook seldom comes loose. So anyway, there's the black bead, and this is I use a fairly small bead for this fly, smaller than you might normally put. This is a size 14 hook. I use a fairly small bead on this because I don't want this to sink right to the bottom. I want it to sink, but I don't want it to I don't want it to sink too quickly. So I put a relatively small bead. This is a size 14 hook, and this one is a 3/32 inch bead. So it's a 2.3 millimeter bead. So it's fairly small for that hook size. But this hook is a little bit short shank, so this is going to tie up more like a size 16 fly because the hook's got a short shank. And as far as sizes in this fly, tie them in 12, 14, and 16. It's, in my opinion, it's too complicated to tie in smaller than a 16. I can't tie them. Maybe you can tie this pattern smaller than a 16, but I can't. I typically tie them in 14s. All right, so we're going to start our thread, and I'm using tan 12-0 because it's going to blend in with the dubbing I'm going to put in the thorax, but you can use any color you want. And I'm going to just start the thread behind the bead, like so. And then I'm going to take a piece of Antron yarn, tan, and I find that on this size 14, one strand of this works just perfectly, and about the length of where it comes off the card is about right. And I like to fuzz it up a little bit. I like to kind of separate the fibers. Sometimes they kind of stick together. You can even take your dubbing needle and kind of fuzz them up. Looks like there was a little glue or something on there. So I like to kind of get them a little messy, just using my fingernail to kind of fuzz it up like so. So it looks like that. And then I find the easiest way to put this on is
Hey, Tom,
to fold it over your thread in the middle.
Thomas.
And yes.
Donut Hole wants to know if you've got the bead on backwards or you did that on purpose.
You know, I think I do have the bead on backwards. I think I do have the big. I do have the big. It doesn't really matter. It wasn't purposeful. I just wasn't looking carefully enough when I put the bead on. Doesn't matter. Yeah, he's right. Donut Hole is right. I put it on backwards, but it's not gonna bother anything. Usually you want the small hole facing the eye of the hook, but this will work out. This will work out okay. And then once I take a few turns, I'm gonna kind of separate these, and I'm gonna kind of pull them towards me because I want when I bring these forward on either side, I want to encircle the body. And when you apply tying thread, it tends to reef them this way, away from you. So if I start them kind of canted toward me a little bit, it'll help eliminate that. It'll help me kind of encircle my body just a little bit. And I like to go a little bit beyond the bend, just down the bend a hair, to give myself a little bit longer body. Maybe I'll go another turn. And then I'm going to come back up to the front of the hook with my tying thread, right up to the bead, the backwards bead. And I'm going to take a piece of Chartreuse ultra wire. This particular fly I have used to imitate the apple caddis shad fly. I think even the Mother's Day caddis has this coloration. It has kind of a greenish body, and so I like this Chartreuse. But you can use any color you want. You could use tan or ginger or brown. Whatever color the caddis pupas are. Most caddis pupae are fairly dull, especially the smaller ones. They're kind of a drab grayish brown. But this particular caddis pupa has a fairly bright body. So I'm going to use a piece of Chartreuse ultra wire. But again, you can use any color ultra wire you want, even black, for a black caddis. So then I'm going to bring my ultra wire over to the hook, and I'm going to stick it right in front of the bead. If I had put the bead on properly, I could have stuck it up inside the bead, but I didn't. And then I'm going to wind this back all the way to the Antron. Fairly smooth wraps. And then come forward. You can put a little taper on this if you want. Caddis pupae don't have much of a taper to them. And I'm going to bring that thread almost up to the bead. Any questions at this point? No? No questions, Philip? Tanner? Oh, by the way, Julia's not here today, folks. I'm sorry.
Not seeing any. I'm using Julia's picture though, so she's present.
Oh, that's better than your picture.
Well, that's for sure.
No questions?
Not that I can see.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. All right. So now I'm just going to wind this ultra wire in touching turns. You know, if you push back a little bit on each turn, you'll get that to be fairly tight. Doesn't have to be super tight. You can probably see this better than I can because you've got a close-up view. And I'm going to go almost all the way to the bead. You just want to segment it. You want a sense of segmentation on that body and a little bit of sparkle. And then I'm going to take a couple turns over that wire. And then, of course, I'm going to cut it and not helicopter it because I'm not a helicopter kind of guy. I got to go get my wire cutters. I just don't trust that helicoptering business. So I'm going to cut it fairly close, like so. And then I like to bend the little tag end back and wrap down on it. That's a little bit too long. Now it's not going to go anywhere. Then I'm going to wind back a little bit on the wire. And here comes the tricky part, one of the tricky parts. So I'm going to take my 2 pieces of Antron. I'm going to try to separate them a little bit. Because the idea is you want to try to encircle the hook with this stuff and just kind of push it forward. And encircle the hook as best you can. And then take like 2 turns over that. And then inspect it. And see, that looks like it's fairly well covered on all sides.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't have green wire, can you suggest another color?
I already did.
Okay.
You can use brown, you can use tan, you can use yellow, you can use black. Depends on what color the caddis pupae are. I'm not a big believer in color, so I use Chartreuse on this, but I'm probably being overly fussy about it. Now I can't find my scissors. Oh, there they are. And then once you're satisfied that Antron is in the right place, you can also take your dubbing needle and move it, or you can actually take because you haven't really tightened down on this, but that's pretty well covered. So the wire is just barely showing through. And then you want to take a couple turns in a forward direction toward the bead to lock that stuff down. Don't go back onto it. Don't go back in this direction, because if you do, you'll change the positioning of your Antron. And then I'm going to cut this. Usually takes multiple cuts. And leave a little fuzz and then fold it back just to make sure that you've secured all of that Antron on there. And then build up a little head. You want this head to be the same diameter as the body. And if you've got a couple loose strands coming out, that's fine. That's actually kind of helps the effectiveness of the pattern. Maybe I'll clean this up a little bit by grabbing those. That's going to be all covered up, so I'm not really worried about it. Okay. Now here's the kind of tricky part of this. It's actually not that tricky, but it's a way of putting wing pads on a caddis pupae that you've probably never seen. So probably you have some saddle hackle. Hopefully you have some black saddle hackle. If you don't have black, the wing pads are very distinctly black on most caddis pupae, but if you don't have black, you can use brown. You can use any hackle at all, but I find saddle hackles to be the best. And this is the place where you use kind of those junky saddle hackles that you really can't use for a streamer or a saltwater fly. You know, they're kind of webby and they're kind of wide. Arguably, you could use these on streamers for a collar or something, but you know, they're not particularly useful saddle hackles. So you use your junk hackle for this stuff. And you want to come in about halfway in the feather and stroke the fibers back till they're even. So that they come to an even point. Okay, I got it there. So you've got your tip and you've got the rest of it right there. And that's going to be your wing pad on the right. Okay. So pretty easy so far. And now you take that point and you place it right at the thorax there. Make a couple of loose turns and then pull down. And you get these really cool, really very realistic looking wing pads. Looks just like a wing pad on a caddisfly. And they kind of point down about 45 degrees. And then once you get that in place, you want to wind forward toward the bead to lock that feather in place. And now this is about the hardest part. You trim off the point there, and then you trim off the waist in front. That's a really sexy looking wing pad. And they're quite durable. Now you got to turn your fly upside down and put it on the other side. I'll change my camera here. And you do the same thing with the other feather. Come in about halfway, pull it back till they're even. Place it pointing down toward the point, about 45 degrees. Take a couple of loose turns and then kind of manipulate that wing pad into place by pulling on the tip. And then once you got it where you want it, take a couple of tight turns forward to lock it in place. Cut the tip off. I'm going to take a chance here. There. And, you know, if you look at a picture of a caddis pupa, that really looks like the wing pads, a wing pad on a caddis pupa. And again, it's a use of junk hackle that you wouldn't ordinarily use for much. And then you come in and clean this up. Hard to get in here with the camera. Sorry about that. Might need multiple cuts to get rid of all the junk, all the waste. And now you can clean that up a little bit, like so. Clean it up a little bit more if you're fussy. You're going to cover that up anyways. And I'm going to adjust my camera angle and focus it. You guys want it in focus, right? All right. I'd really like to get rid of some more of this stuff, but I just getting in there with this camera in the way is tough. Okay, now I'm going to just take a little bit of hare's ear dubbing. You can use any old dubbing, really, just to cover up those thread wraps. I'm using some hare's ear that I made. And you're only going to need a little tiny bit, like that much. That's probably enough for 2 flies. And then one of the things that I like to do, because I find that the point of breakdown on nymph patterns like this with a fur thorax is the fur always seems to unwind before anything else deteriorates on the fly. So what I've been doing
Tom.
lately, yeah.
Okay, I thought you were on the wrong camera.
No, what I've been doing lately is putting a little bit of this water-based head cement on my thread before I dub. It's going to lock the fur into place better. And I think it helps with durability. So I'm just going to take this water-based head cement, and it comes with a brush, and just brush it on the thread. And it'll get sticky in a minute. But it's going to be better than wax because it's actually going to dry and then adhere to the fur and to the hook. All right, so got that covered. I wouldn't do this with super glue because you're going to get it all over your fingers when you dub. Then I'm going to dub just a small amount of hare's ear fur on there. Don't need much, just a little bit. And wind that over my thread wraps. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more to cover up those thread wraps. Now when I whip finish, my thread is going to sink into that fur and it won't show. So now I'm going to whip finish. And put some pressure just behind the bead on that to try to sink that thread into the dubbing. If it shows, it doesn't matter. And there is your, zoom in a little bit. There is your TR deep caddis pupa. So not that hard, but not the easiest fly in the world to tie either. Once you get the hang of making those wing pads, it's not bad at all. It's pretty easy. And actually, this year, I caught my largest brown trout on the bat and kill on this fly, 23-inch brown. I went down to the river with a couple buddies, and we were hoping for a spinner fall, hoping for rising fish. And I said, well, the heck with it. I'm going to throw a nymph in this riffle for a little bit. Maybe I can pick up a smaller fish. And whammo, about the 12th cast, biggest brown trout I've ever caught on the bat and kill. Took this pupa, just blind fish. There was no activity. I didn't even know the fish was there. It is a good searching pattern when fish aren't rising. And there weren't even any caddisflies on the water, but fish love caddis pupae, and I think they jump on them whenever they see them. So anyway, question here from Dryflip. I know you tie on both Renzetti and Regal. Which do you find you tie on more often for standard trout sizes? Oh, that would be hands down the Renzetti. It's got, they have finer jaws. When I tie rotary, or when I reverse, I don't tie rotary much, but when I reverse the fly, I still have working room. I don't have to put the jaws straight in line. So yeah, definitely for trout flies, my preferred vise would be the Renzetti. And with these are the midge jaws that I'm using, which I like for any size. I actually like for any size trout fly. Even a size 10 or 12, I find that the midge jaws are great. You get more working room because those jaws are small, and the angle lets you get in there and really work on a smaller fly. So, could you take us through the deer hair stacking technique? Not today, Trond. We're not using deer hair. So there are a number of flies in the archives. If you go onto YouTube under Tying with Tom, you will see a number of videos on using deer hair. Ed says, I love my Renzetti. Also, this would be a job tying under size 16. Yeah, it would not be fun at tying under size 16 with this fly. So I use it for the bigger sizes. Any other questions? Would this be a good time to use a half hitch? Roger, I don't use half hitches at all when I tie. And there are probably some times when I should. But it's just not something I use. I use the tension of the bobbin instead of using a half hitch. But yeah, half hitches is a good technique to use, and it's just not the way I tie. I saw another question that we haven't answered. Why not a bubble of Antron? Well, Fred, there is a bubble of Antron. It's just not a big, wide bubble. It's a tighter bubble. And I think that by making this bubble tighter, there is less resistance in the water and the fly sinks better. So I'm still getting the sparkle and the effect of the Antron without having that great big wide bubble, because the wider a fly gets, the harder it's going to be to sink it. So I don't want to put a lot of weight on this because it's a nice, stealthy, subtle little fly. And I want it to sink fairly well. So I use I keep that Antron tighter to the body, as opposed to the way LaFontaine and other people do it by pulling it out and making a big bubble. But you could try it you could try it that way too. Just all about sink rate. Any other questions that I've missed? What goes wrong with helicoptering? You know, Chad, nothing's ever gone wrong with helicoptering. I just don't trust it because you're yanking that piece of wire around and then you're breaking it off and you're not re-anchoring it with anything. So I don't know. It seems to work for people. Certainly works for Tim Flagler, but I don't trust it. But if you like helicoptering, you go right ahead and do it that way. Is there a good substitute for Antron? There probably is. Xylon, or you could try even EP fiber, but I don't believe either of those fibers have the same reflective qualities as Antron, so you don't get the same kind of sparkle. And yes, Rogers, this fly would work in lakes if you have caddis in your lakes. Should work fine in lakes. Yes, Heiko, you can fish this fly however you would fish any other kind of nymph. You know, there's I think a misconception amongst people that there's certain nymph patterns that you use for indicators or sight fishing and certain patterns that you use for Euro nymphing style. And really, you know, the good nymph anglers that I know, they use them interchangeably. So a nymph is a nymph, and there are lots of different ways of getting a nymph down to the trout, but the patterns can remain the same. Now they do tend toward thinner, heavier flies with Euro nymphing because they want to get that fly down quickly, and you know there's the expression thin for the win. So flies like the Perdigon, which have a thin body that's epoxied, so it sinks very quickly without using a lot of weight. But you can use any nymph any way you want, and you should experiment. You know, I fish Perdigons, which is, you know, almost everybody thinks of it as a Euro nymph. Euro nymphing style. I fish Perdigons below a dry dropper or an indicator all the time. And I also fish things like big stoneflies and hare's ears when I fish Euro style. So I don't think it matters. There may be people that disagree with me, but you know, Euro style, you do want something that sinks quickly, unless you're fishing quite shallow water. Do you tie this without a bead? I do, Mark. I do occasionally tie it without a bead. If the fish are in really shallow water, or I want one that's just under the surface, I will tie this without a bead. I tied a couple when I was practicing this fly. Tied a couple without a bead. So yeah, or you could tie it with a non-toxic wire or lead wire underbody instead of a bead. Yep, absolutely, could do that. I wouldn't tie this as an emerger with a deer hair wing because the wire tends to sink it. But Leiden says, I was fishing streamers at a lake the other day and snapped my rod tip when the split shot came back and made contact. Yeah, that's why I stay away from split shot if I can, Leiden. Yeah, you know, you might, although it's sometimes a pain to use, you might try Sink Putty, which is a tungsten putty. It's soft, and it's a pain because it often slides or comes off the tippet. But if you're not doing a lot of false casting or long distance casting, that Sink Putty won't snap your rod or won't fracture your rod. So next time you may want to try some Sink Putty. I hope your rod was guaranteed. Let's see, what else? Glass bead? Sure, Wade, why not? Try it with a glass bead, absolutely. I was just about to ask if you could use solder wire if you were in a bit of a deeper pool. Yes, you could. It's an Orvis rod. Okay, so you're good. You're good, Leiden. We'll honor that guarantee. Any other questions? That's the fly. It didn't take quite as long as I thought. Am I getting faster, or are you not asking as many questions? I don't know. I hope I didn't go too fast, because I hope there were some people that tied along. But if you missed something, these are always archived on YouTube and on the Orvis Facebook page, so you can always go back and watch them again if you'd like. I don't see any more questions. I didn't drop it stumbling on the bank with a little too much liquid courage on board this time. Yeah, blame it on the split shot, Leiden, not the bourbon. Mark, I'm glad you like the wing pads. Yeah, that's an old technique. We sold Orvis, I think still sells a caddis pupa pattern. I think the beadhead caddis pupa has these wing pads. So it's an older technique that one of the people on the Orvis staff came up with probably 20 years ago. So it's not anything new. You don't see it that often, and it's not that hard. And it really, I feel that the wing pads on a caddis pupa are very prominent, and this really does a good job of imitating it. Okay, all right, everyone. Well, unless any questions come in the next 10 seconds, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. And I want to thank Tanner and Phil Monahan for watching things in the background, posting links and checking the YouTube and all that stuff. I don't think we have a fly tying next. Let me just check here. Next,
it's the 4th of July, Tom.
Next Monday is 4th of July, so I hope everyone has a wonderful 4th. Oh, I got lost in my tabs here. So we won't have one next Monday, and I haven't decided all of the flies for July, but I do know what the tie-off with Tim Flagler is, and that's going to be, hang on, I'm gonna tell you when that's gonna be. I gotta look it up here. July 18th at 3 p.m., we're going to tie a clink hammer. The standard clink hammer, which is a great kind of dry / emerger fly. A really, really popular pattern. So Tim and I are gonna go head to head July 18th on a clink hammer. And the week before, I don't know what we're gonna tie. I gotta figure out another pattern. So anyway, I wish you all a great 4th. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you're gonna do something fun on the 4th. Maybe get out there and do a little fishing, or spend time with the family. And we will see you in 2 weeks from today with a pattern as yet undetermined. So thanks again, and thanks for all your great questions. You guys are awesome. The questions were really intelligent and well thought out. So appreciate that.